There's a bingo challenge on the fantasy subreddit that I've been participating in for 2 years now. It runs every year on April 1st all the way through to March 31st of the next year. My first year participating was the 23-24 round, and I've participated again this year in the 24-25 round. Last year my bingo card was all about reading what I had on my shelf. I bought so many books last year because I was so motivated to start reading, and I did read quite a few of them, but I didn't read nearly enough that I was planning to for the bingo. This year I decided to challenge myself a little bit differently. I decided to do a card that was completely full of BIPOC authors to make sure that I was continuing to read diversely. I am 64% of the way through my card. I just have 9 more squares to fill out, and so I thought I would talk through which squares I had left, potential books that I was thinking about reading for them, and then hopefully I'll be able to read some in this video. I should say that I'd also actually got 2 other cards kind of in the back burner. I'm not 100% sure whether I'll complete them. I'm not trying to complete all 3 cards. It's more that I'm just filling them in as the year goes on. So the first one is another what's on my shelf card. I'm just trying to read books that are on my shelf and see if they fit within the squares. So any books that I read throughout the year, I just take a look and see whether they fit onto that card. And then my second card is an LGBT card to see whether any of the books that I read that year also fit into the categories as well. So this is a look at the bingo board. All the X's obviously show the ones that I've completed already and the ones that I still need to complete. The Reddit bingo allows you to complete the card either in normal mode, which is just by completing the prompt, or in hard mode, which adds an extra caveat onto the prompt. I'm not trying to do an all hard mode card, I'm just trying to complete the card. So some of them that I have read do fit hard mode and will fit hard mode, and some don't, but I'm not trying to stick to just hard mode prompts. From the first row, I'm still missing the first in a series. The prompt for this one is pretty obvious. It's read the first book in a series, and the hard mode prompt is the series is more than 3 books long. At the moment I was thinking about reading The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. It's one that I've had on my Kindle for I think maybe 2 years at this point, and I've been wanting to read it for quite a while. I do have quite a few others on my TBR as well that could fit into this. It's kind of an easy one to fulfill, but some of them fit into other categories, so I'm trying to avoid using them for that. The other one I'm missing on the first row is the alliterative title. The prompt for this one is read a book where multiple words in the title begin with the same letter. For example, Legends and Lattes, A Storm of Swords, Children of Blood and Bone. Hard mode for this one is the title has 3 words or more that start with the same letter. For this one I was thinking about reading Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. This is another one that I've heard really good things about and it's been sat on my TBR for ages. Gunmetal Gods is about a couple of characters, one whose daughter has been taken and one whose wife has disappeared, and they're banding together to take down the mysterious evil in the book. On the second row I'm missing 3 squares so far. The first one is entitled Animals. For this one the prompt is read a book that has an animal in the title. The animal in the title does not have to appear in the story. For example, Wolfsong, A Feast for Crows. The hard mode for this one is the animal in the title is a fantasy or sci-fi creature, so obviously something like The Last Unicorn or the Kaiju Preservation Society. The book that I was considering reading for entitled Animals is Dragon Rider by Taran Matharu. I picked this up from the Broken Binding. It's a special edition. I thought it looked really cool. And also a dragon fan. It's a really nice edition that's got a really cool end pages, and also as well the hardcover as well. This one features a character who goes on the run with a princess and also a dragon egg. So I really want to get to this one at some point in the next year. I've had it for a while now and I'm looking forward to reading it. It's the second dragon book so far. The next one that I'm missing on this one is Prologues and Epilogues. The prompt for this is read a book that has either a prologue or an epilogue, and hard mode, the book must have both. The book that I was thinking about reading for this prompt is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I know this one was really popular a couple of years ago on BookTube. It's a gothic story that features a married couple having to return to her childhood home, and all sorts of gothic strange things start to happen. And then the final square on this row that I'm missing is the self-published or indie published square. This one is pretty self-explanatory. It needs to be a book either self-published or published through an indie publisher. If it was formally self-published, it only counts if you read it when it was self-published. So there's a book further on in this list that actually would no longer fit into this category. The hard mode for this one is that if it's self-published and has fewer than 100 ratings on Goodreads, or it's an indie publisher that has done an Ask Me Anything with the subreddit fantasy. For this one I'm a little bit undecided. There are so many different books that could fall into the category. There are a couple that I can get through the library hopefully that I'll be able to take a look at, and I also have quite a few downloaded onto my Kindle, so I haven't quite decided what I'm going to read for that one yet. On the next row the only square that I'm missing is the Dark Academia square. For this one it is read a book that fits the Dark Academia aesthetic. This includes school and university, secret societies and dark secrets. Does not have to be fantasy but must be speculative. And the hard mode for this one is the school itself is entirely mundane. For this one obviously something like Babel by R.F. Kuang with it, but I don't have that currently. But what I do have is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. As I was saying, this would previously fit into the self-published category because it's just recently been traditionally published, and I've heard nothing but good things about this one. Originally, I was thinking about reading The Sword of Kaigan for another one of the prompts on here, as I have that downloaded on my Kindle as well. But because I knew that I wanted to probably read this for Dark Academia, I decided to switch that one out and go for this one instead. In this one, we follow a character who is studying magic and who ends up going to a school for magic, and there are lots of Dark Academia secrets going on. From the fourth row, the square that I'm missing is the judge a book by its cover. Again, this one's pretty obvious. Choose a book that you like the cover of. The hard mode for this one is pick a book based on only the information available on the cover, no reading the blurb. This one is another one where I'm not too sure what book I'm going to pick yet. I think it's one that is pretty subjective and that I almost don't need to make a decision now because there are so many books with pretty covers. This one is still up in the air. I have seen a few covers that I do like the look of, so I'm going to take a look at those and see which one maybe I would like to read. Because quite a few of the books that I want to read are quite chunky, I'm thinking about picking a shorter book for this one, and same with the self-published or indie published square, just to make it a little bit easier for me to get through these 9 books in the next couple of months. And then on the final row, I'm missing 2 squares. The first one is Eldritch Creatures. The prompt for this one is read a book featuring a being that is uncanny, unearthly and weird. This can be a god or a monster from another plane or realm and is usually beyond mortal understanding. Hard mode is this book is not related to Cthulhu mythos. For this one, I think something like Gunmetal Gods would fit this prompt. One of the books I've read in the past year that could fit into this prompt but I've decided not to use is The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Core and Richard Kadri. The only reason I'm not using this one for this square is because it's co-authored and one of the authors is not a person of colour. I know Cassandra Core has written some other stuff that might fit into this square though, so I'm going to take a look at that and see whether I can make it fit the prompt. And then finally, the last square that I need to fill is the reference materials one. The prompt for this is read a book that features additional materials such as a map, footnotes, a glossary or translation guide. The hard mode for this one is the book must contain at least 2 types of additional materials. So something like Blood Over Brighthaven would work. Just flicking through it, we have a map right at the beginning, and then we also have a bunch of diagrams as well, a spellograph. And so I'm guessing this is related to what happens within the book. And also flicking through it, there are also quotes as well. So if you are also doing it and you haven't got something for this prompt and you haven't read an ML Wang book already for your bingo, then you could always read Blood Over Brighthaven. I don't currently have any other Dark Academia on my TBR, which is why I'm going to keep it for that square. Sword of Kaigan was the book that I was going to use for reference materials before I decided to put Blood Over Brighthaven on my TBR instead. So I haven't quite decided again what it is that I want to read for this square yet. I have heard that books like Grace of Kings and also The Oleander Sword, which is the sequel to The Jasmine Throne that I want to get to this year anyway, do have reference materials in them. So I need to go and take a look because I have the physical copy of The Oleander Sword. I also have The Grace of Kings on my Kindle, so I can take a look at them both and see if any of them meet the prompt. I'm filming this at the end of December, so I still have 3 months to get through all 9 books that I need to get through, so it shouldn't be too difficult to do. I'm filming this at the end of December, so I still have 3 months left, which is plenty of time to get through the 9 books that I need to get through. I'm thinking of splitting this video into 2. One with half the books, the other with the rest of the books I need to read. And at the end of March I can review which books I did read, as well as whether I read any more books to fill the other 2 bingo cards that I also started. Currently for my on my shelf bingo card, I've only read 8 books out of the 25. Currently for my on my shelf bingo card, I've only read 8 books out of the 25, which seems like really... which doesn't seem like many at all, but because I've split books between the LGBT card and the BIPOC card, I feel like this card has suffered a little bit. On the LGBT card that I've started, I've read 11 books, so I'm halfway there. I could finish this card, but I'm not going to try and pressure myself into finishing it. It really just depends on what library holds I have out and what I'm feeling in the mood to read anyway. So we'll see. I'll review it at the end of March, just in time for the next bingo. So it's been like a month. I filmed that clip back in December and I haven't really read anything that fits the fantasy bingo prompts yet, but I have 2 months and so I'm trying to get through the rest of them now. So I'm currently reading Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. This follows Tiana. She becomes the first female high mage, which is not a spoiler, it's in the blurb, and she is faced with quite a lot of difficulty in proving her worth. They don't admit female high mages, and so she is having to really prove herself, specifically with the other newly recruited high mages. Because they are against her being a high mage, they have decided to give her an assistant who is a janitor, and this janitor is named Tomil. We start the book with one of his points of view, and he's Quen, and the Quen people are seen as lesser than the Turanian people. It's meant to be a slight against Siona, but it turns out that it kind of works to both of their advantages, a little bit at least. Siona is starting to unpick the things that she thought she knew about the world that she lives in. Having Tomil there really begins to challenge some of the viewpoints that she's held, because she has only ever really thought about herself and only really thought about what it means to be a woman in this world, in this patriarchal world, whereas she's never really thought about what it means for other people and the disrespect that they go through. You can see it in some of the ways that she speaks about Tomil. She just says that he's not as educated, so he's not going to understand as much, and that he's doing well considering that he's Quen, and you can see the prejudices that she has, and they're slowly starting to be unravelled as we go through the book, and they engage with each other, and Tomil challenges her on his own thoughts and how he has a right to his own way of living and understanding religion and magic, so on. So I'm at the halfway point pretty much, and we're just now starting to see Siona really start to understand that things are not quite as they seem. I have certainly realised the people around her are still telling her that, that Tomil and the things that she thinks she has seen are not correct, and you can start to get the suspicion that actually that she's been lied to. And so I'm hoping from this point on things will start to make a change, because she is a little bit insufferable but I think that's part of the point. She is someone who's been raised in this environment and has never had any interaction with anyone outside of Tehran, or at least very little interaction, and she is now starting to have her viewpoints challenged. I only started it last night, and I got halfway through. It is really quite easy to read, which is really nice because it's such a big book. I purposely picked to start it on a weekend so that I would be able to just get through it in the weekend, but I think I'll probably finish it today, which is great. I've just noticed on the back it's been blurred by Evan Winter, who is the author of the book that I was going to read for the first in a series prompt, and I am still hoping to get to that book at some point because it's been on my TBR for literally years. I've had it on my Kindle for probably like 2 years, but I did read another book the other day, which is The Mountain Crown by Karen Loewentschi. It also fits in the first book of a series category, so for now I'm penciling that one in as the book for that one so that I can just tick another prompt off, and then I can do some fiddling close to her time as I settle on what my actual book for each category is. The Mountain Crown follows a main character called Maker, who is a member of the Barsuan people who have a special connection to dragons, and her people have been forced out of the land that they used to live in. She returns back because she has to gather a king dragon from the Crown Mountains to kind of restore the natural dragon balance, because they can't have too many king dragons around, and is forced to take along a man who is seen as a traitor to her kind, and then also a man that she's freed. It's only a novella, so it's quite short, and I think this kind of falls into the trap of me having this relationship with novellas where I don't really think things are fleshed out enough. I don't think that the characters were fleshed out enough, and so when we hit the kind of climax and this significant event happens to one of the main characters, I just didn't really care that much, because I just didn't have enough of a connection with them. So it was a fine novella. I gave it 3 stars. At this point though, I'm not sure I'm going to continue with the rest of the series, but it is the first in the series, so as I said, I'm going to mark that one off the prompt list for now. But anyway, I'll be back with an update when I finish Blood Over Bright Haven. I'm back and I finished Blood Over Bright Haven. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I did really like it. I think the magic in this seems really complicated at first, but the more you go on and the more you understand what Siona and Tomil are beginning to understand, the more it makes sense. So I really appreciated that, because I think sometimes that magic systems in fantasy books are complicated and you can't necessarily understand them, which isn't a problem. I don't mind a complicated fantasy bit of world building, but at the same time it's nice to be able to understand what's going on. I think that once the action really starts to unfold, it starts to spiral quite quickly, and so things are happening and moving along at a really fast pace. And then we have the ending as well, which I won't say too much about obviously, but I like the parallels with the other scene that it parallels, and I can't say more than that without spoiling it, but yeah, it was 4 stars. It was a good read, and you could use this if you were doing the bingo. You could use it for dark academia, or you can use it for the references, the reference materials prompt as well, because it has images in the front of the book. It has excerpts from letters and historical texts, and also a map as well. So there's plenty of stuff for reference materials. I think I am gonna make a decision later about where I want to slot this one, because I think, as I said, it can work for both. I can obviously try and read Babel, which is on my 25 in 2025 that I would like to get to. I would prefer to read it physically, because I think I feel like I almost have to after having owned the physical copy, and also with all the footnotes and stuff. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure I can get one of the available anytime, like Lucky Day or whatever it is called, from the library. So I'm undecided. Yeah, we'll see. So that's 2 books down for bingo. I think that leaves me with 7 to go, unless I filled any others in with any other books I could find. I don't know what I'm reading next. I haven't decided yet. Quick spot change, because I just thought I'd show you what books I've hauled recently. So I have Hamajang Luck by Makana Yamamoto, which is a heist book with 2 X's, and that's all I know about it pretty much. If you're doing the fantasy bingo, obviously this one would work for criminals, and actually I might have to have a look. I think I put down the first Greenbone book, Jade Wall. I've forgotten what the book's called. I think for criminals, but this one has a heist and that fits hard mode, so I could maybe change it. We'll see. And then I also picked up Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambao, sorry, which is a really pretty Waterstones edition cover. It has a really pretty insides, and also a really pretty hard cover as well. All I know about this one is that it's a mystical pawn shop. I'm going to read this hopefully in February for Kayla's members book club, and also the next Emily Wilde book. But I'm really glad I picked up this copy because I think it's really pretty, and they're both by authors of colour, so they fit the bingo potentially. Haven't read them yet. We'll have to wait and see if they fit any prompts. Hello, it's been a minute, but I wanted to update you because I finished Hamajang Luck. I'm giving this 3 stars. In this book, we are following Edie, who has just got out of prison. They were in prison for 8 years, and they were snitched on by their partner in crime, Angel, who is also the one who has now gotten them out of prison as well. Angel has asked them to do one last heist, and it is targeting Angel's current boss, the person they tried to steal from 8 years ago. That is so the reason that kind of Edie's in prison in the first place. Edie ultimately agrees because the money that they would get from this heist would set them up for life. It would set their family up for life. They have gone back to live with their sister, who is pregnant and about to have her third baby, and financially they're struggling a little bit, so the money would really make a lot of difference. Also, Edie's niece is going through cancer treatment, so that is something that they need to fund as well. Ultimately, the book follows them as they are building this team and completing the heist. I've given it 3 stars. It is a debut novel, and I think sometimes I hate to say you can tell when a novel's a debut novel, but I feel like sometimes you can't. It really reminded me of Frontier by Grace Curtis, which I read in 2023, which was another kind of sci-fi, a queer sci-fi book that just felt, it wasn't the strongest, and I know that Grace Curtis has had 2 books since then that seem to be doing a lot better, so I'm kind of hopeful that maybe that this is just the beginning, because ultimately this wasn't bad, but there were a lot of things I felt could have been worked on maybe to make it a lot stronger. The first being that it didn't really feel much like a sci-fi at all. I read a review that said that, and I do agree. It's mentioned in the book that they are on Kepler, and mentioned of like some flying cars, but ultimately the neighbourhoods, especially the neighbourhoods that Edie lives in, which are kind of the working class neighbourhoods, just feel like Earth. They don't feel different at all. And I think also the connection to, we don't know how far out they are, or at least I don't think we do, from moving from Earth to Kepler, but they have such a strong connection with the Hawaiian part of their identity that it did feel really like it was on Earth, just with a few sci-fi elements. Also, the romance in this is not my favourite. It's part of the reason I held off updating partway through, because I feel like I could just tell where it was going, or that it just wasn't very strong, and that I was hoping that maybe it would improve a bit by the end, and I don't think it really did at all. Edie and Angel are obviously childhood friends. They've grown up together, so they have a lot of this backstory, and I'm a girl who likes exes to lovers. I can work with that in a book, but also it didn't really feel like exes to lovers. Like, it just sounded like there weren't two exes. But they're not established before the events of this book. They're just childhood friends, I think. Anyway, the point is that they spend, I literally read down the page, so up until page 265, they spend the book having a little bit of snarky moments with each other, because Edie is not really happy that they have to rely on Angel, and Angel is really set on making this heist work and leading this heist and being the head honcho in charge. And so there are a few moments where, you know, Edie tells Angel to dress more like they're going to this club, because they're dressed too much like a narc, and it's like meant to be a moment of chemistry, but there is nothing really. And page 265 is when they kiss for the first time, and up until that point, genuinely, there is no chemistry between them at all. Any kind of banter or snarkiness between them just doesn't work, in my opinion. And so when you get to that point, and then suddenly there's another added chemistry tension between them, it just doesn't really feel like it works. And then the book's only another 100 pages more after that, and in those 100 pages we have the heist. We have like the high stakes moment where, you know, the climax of them admitting how they feel about each other, and I just don't really think that there was enough relationship development in the book for it to work, personally. And also some of the other characters as well. A lot of the background characters just felt kind of flat. They felt very much like a specific character archetype that they needed to fit in. We had Sai, who was kind of the muscle. We had Sarah, who was the new one to the heist, and Sarah, she was the new one to the heist, and she was a little bit innocent and learning new things. And then we had the younger Tatiana, who's the younger thief in the group, and there's a lot of back and forth between Edie and Tatiana, because Edie doesn't have any cyber mods or anything, whereas Tatiana has a lot, and the kind of old versus new, you know, oh, you're the old one here, and I'm the new one on the block, and so I will be more efficient than you. And it just feels a little bit flat, I think, a little bit 2D. So ultimately it was a fine read. It read quite quickly, and it was a heist book. But it was 3 for me, and I would take a look at see what this book author publishes in the future, but I'm not going to immediately jump to pick it up, I think, till I see the reviews. Again, to compare with Grace Curtis, I've seen a lot of more positive reviews for the second and third book that they've written. Frontier wasn't my cup of tea, so I'm kind of tempted to maybe pick one of those up. So yeah, that's How Much I Look done. It's now February, so I'm gonna start Watermoon, I think, next. And then I have one other book that I want to read for this video, which I think is going to be my self-pub Indie Square, which I am kind of just seeing how the day comes on that one. I have After the Dragons by Cynthia Zhang from the library out at the moment, and I started a little bit of it, but I need to get into it further to decide where I'm going to stick to that. But if I don't, ultimately I'll just find something else that fits the prompt. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and I'll check in when I have started or maybe finished Watermoon. The problem with filming on your phone is that sometimes you're an idiot and you film an 8-minute clip, and then when you go to check it afterwards you realise that the camera wasn't facing at you, and you didn't turn it around the whole time because you're using the back camera. So Sometimes we are fools. Anyway, to try and remember everything that I just spoke about for the last 8 minutes, I said that I would check in with you when I started After the Dragons by Cynthia Zhang, and I started it, but I'm switching books for the prompt because I'm a mood reader at heart and I just changed my mind. And so instead I decided to read The Bruising of Kilwa by Nassim Jamnia. This follows our main character Firuz, whose people have been persecuted as they have a skill of blood magic, and so they have fled their home country with their mother and their younger brother and are making a life for themselves in Kilwa. Firuz ends up getting a job at a healers alongside this healer named Kofi, who's one of the few people who will hire them. And then the story is split into a couple of parts: year 1, year 2, and then a kind of epilogue in year 3, where we see Firuz as they start to settle down, and then also uncover this bruising epidemic that seems to appear, which is mentioned in the blurb. I gave this 3 stars. I read it via audiobook. It's my first audiobook of the year, and it's quite short, only 5 hours, so I was able to listen to it today. I think that one of my critiques is maybe that it could have been longer. It's split into year 1 and then year 2, as I said, and year 1 focuses on Firuz as they get this job with Kofi and they meet this orphan that they begin to train, Afsane, and Afsane is like Firuz and has this blood magic and has never been trained as an orphan, and so Firuz takes it upon themselves to go ahead and decide to take in Afsane and to train them up. And then we switch to year 2, where we see the training take place, and then also see other aspects of the plot, like Firuz's relationship with their brother starting to deteriorate because their brother is trans and is feeling really uncomfortable as they're going through puberty, and has been hoping that Firuz would be able to cast this spell that transforms him into the body that he would like to have as opposed to the one that he does have. And Firuz is working on this spell, but Firuz's sibling doesn't want to wait, wants it immediately, but unfortunately it's just not happening, and because Firuz needs more information, and so there's some tension between them. And then we also have this bruising epidemic, as I said, that's mentioned in the blurb, where we start to see that people who are coming into the clinic and people who turn up at the mortuary are having this bruising that appears on their body, and we start to kind of see, as things kind of go on, how that happens. The action picks up right towards the end as we find out what has caused this, because there's a lot of tension, because this is a bruising which could implicate Firuz or Firuz's people, as it means that there's something going on with blood, and so we start to really unpack what has happened. As I said, I think it could work more if it was longer. I think that year 1 and year 2, they could have both been a little bit more in depth. We have a lot of world building, but at the same time it's a really character and relationship driven story, and so we don't necessarily see too much of the world, and I think that would have been nicer. And I think that you would have got that if you did have the longer story, whether that's year 1 and year 2 split and you see the progression of time and training a little bit deeper on the pages and makes a longer novel. I'm trying to wrap my brains to think about what else I said in that previous clip, but I don't remember. So yeah, I gave the book 3 stars. I've decided to read it for the Indie Pub Square because it's published by an indie publisher, so it would work for that, it would work for author of colour, and yeah, I think that's it. I'm quite annoyed with myself that I managed to just film literally nearly 9 minutes and didn't even realise the camera was not facing me, but whatever. I'm also finally going to start Watermoon today because there's some sprints later on. I'll check in once I've started Watermoon. I remembered something whilst I was editing that last clip that I forgot to add, which is that the author's note at the end talks about the author's experience of being Persian American, specifically how in present day Persian people are oppressed, the loss of Farsi the language and how few people speak it, but that in learning their own history they learned that Persia at one point was an oppressor, and trying to balance this narrative of being from a culture that was an oppressor at one point in history and now is being oppressed but in the modern day, and so that conversation was touched on at the very end of the book, within the story itself but also within the author's note. I think it would have been really nice to have seen that more within the story because it is really just focused on right at the very end, and so it would have made for an interesting conversation if that was a more focal point of the story and that was unearthed maybe a little bit earlier. But yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to say about the Brising of Kilda. In other news, I am reading Watermoon. I'm 70% of the way through now. I'm quite far through. This follows our main character Hannah, and she is taking over her father's pawn shop, which is a place that people can go to get rid of their regrets. Her mother was banished while she was just a baby, and there is a mystery as to what has gone on there. Hannah wakes up on the first day that she is supposed to be tending the pawn shop herself, and her father has gone missing and the pawn shop has been ransacked. And so the point of the story is that we are following Hannah, and we're also following a man named Kaishin, who is someone who has wandered into the pawn shop on the morning that her father has gone missing, and they together are trying to find out what exactly has happened. I think this is a really pretty cover, really pretty spread edges as well, as I said. Unfortunately, the story is not my favourite. I think that the first few chapters where we are seeing what the pawn shop is and the mystery begins, I think are really interesting, and I think I've never read Before the Coffee Gets Cold, but from my understanding it's almost little short stories set within this coffee shop that I think would have worked quite well if this was told quite similarly, where we experience these stories of people coming in and out of the pawn shop. It could have been a really short vignettes, but it's not. It's something completely different, which is fine. But with a couple of the other factors, like the writing and the romance, is not really my favourite. The romance is happening, well, I'm 270 pages in, so I'm quite far in, but the romance has started way too quickly for my liking. There was already hints that there was something between them in the first 80 pages, when they barely knew each other. And then on top of that, I feel like at first we are going into this world through Hannah's perspective, where we are trying to wonder with her what this mystery is, but the main character quickly switches to Kaishin, who is new to this world and so needs everything explaining to him. So Hannah takes on that role of explaining everything as they move through the different areas that they go to, which are really cool and really interesting and complex. It's definitely quite whimsical, and there are so many cool little snippets of things that would have been really nice if they weren't in the story in the way that they are, if that makes sense. So because Hannah becomes the kind of leader, because she has this knowledge of this world, and Kaishin doesn't, it feels very much that we're being told stuff and that we're not being shown stuff, and so I'm struggling with that bit. Also, the sentences of each scene tend to end with kind of just like a snappy statement, like, you know, why can't we do this? Because of this. And it moves on to the next scene and it happens repeatedly, and it kind of takes me out of the story a little bit. So I'm nearly finished. I'm going to finish it today. It's probably going to be a 3-star. I didn't really have high expectations going in because I'd seen quite a lot of people say that they didn't enjoy it as much as they hoped they would. So I can definitely see where people were coming from. I finished Watermoon and I think I am settling on a 3-star. There was a quite interesting plot twist towards the end, which I do think the plot of this was interesting. I think the writing and the romance didn't quite make it interesting enough for me to enjoy it more than I did. There is definitely a lot going into this. I'm not sure if I said already, but I think the cover is very deceiving. It looks quite cozy and whimsical. It's honestly a lot darker than I anticipate going in, and again, that's not a bad thing. It's just that other factors outside of the plot didn't make this work for me. So a 3-star. So that is the end of the video. I now have 4 more squares left on the bingo board until I'm finished. So as you might have guessed, there'll be another video coming where I've finished the bingo board. The squares I have left are Eldritch Creatures, Prologues and Epilogues, Alliterative Title, and Entitled Animals. So I've got 4 left. I have a couple of books that I'm thinking about reading for them, but as I said, I'm a mood reader, so there's no guarantee I'm going to stick to those books. I'm hoping to get to Dragon Rider though. I think I mentioned at the beginning of this video The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, and then I also have Gunmetal Gods and potentially Hammers on the Bone, which is Cassandra Core's Eldritch, I don't know if you can hear my neighbour's cat in the background, which is Cassandra Core's Eldritch horror kind of novella detective series. So 2 chunky fantasy books. So we'll see if I actually do get to those or swap them out for something else, which is highly likely, knowing me, but I would like to get to both of them because I've owned both of them for at least a year for Dragon Rider, and I think probably about the same for Good Metal Gods as well. So hopefully I'll be able to get to those and knock them off my TBR. I have a month and a half, so enough time to get through them all, and then that's the end of the 2024 bingo, and we'll soon be into the 2025 bingo. So you can definitely expect a video from me on that when that comes out.